Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. I'm outside the gurdwara in London where Udham Singh used to worship. Viewers of this video will probably be aware of who Udham Singh was, that he is best known for having shot dead Sir Michael O'Dwyer. O'Dwyer was the governor of the Punjab in 1919 at the time of the Jallianwala Bagh atrocity. So Udham Singh was a Sikh from the Punjab, and he came here to London shortly before the Second World War began. There was a small Indian community in London at the time, perhaps 1% of the city's population. In the UK as a whole, the Indian community was much smaller than that. Curiously, about a third of Indians in the United Kingdom are Sikhs, which is much higher than the proportion of Sikhs in India. Anyway, this Gurdwara was known as the Shepherd's Bush Gurdwara at the time. These days we wouldn't consider this to be in Shepherd's Bush. The Shepherd's Bush area doesn't begin till about 500 metres to the west of here. We call this Holland Park probably, or Notting Hill. Anyway, you can see the orange flag in traditional style. So Udham Singh would regularly address his fellow worshippers here, and he would tell the congregants how British imperialism was ghastly and abominable, and there must be no truck with it, it must be brought to an end forthwith. However, he said he was not against the British people as a whole, and living in the United Kingdom for some time, he got to know some ordinary British people. Whilst he was in India, the few British people he came into contact with were in positions of authority. At the very least, they were soldiers or police officers, but here he met working class people, people who'd never been to India, who didn't know much about India, and saw that British people were not all upper class, were not all educated, and so forth. And some of them indeed were sympathetic to the cause of Indian nationalism, particularly those of left-wing views. The Labour Party, was the opposition party at the time, believed that India should have independence as soon as practicable, and communists certainly believed that. Anyway, the rest is history. Michael O'Dwyer was giving a talk to the Central Asiatic Society in Caxton Hall, and this was advertised, so Udham Singh saw that in the newspapers. He went there with the intention of shooting dead O'Dwyer. He did so very easily. He wounded the Marquis of Zetland as well, and Udham Singh was overpowered, arrested on the spot, pleaded guilty. His trial was an open and shut case, and indeed he expressed his gratitude to the judge. He was ingratiated to him for having been sentenced to death, as he felt it was the highest honour that he could be accorded, and indeed he was hanged by the neck until dead at Wandsworth Prison and buried within the prison walls, because and the sentence does say the person must be interred within the prison premises. He was not to be cremated as is the norm according to Sikh rites. However, in the late 1960s, Harold Wilson, a Labour Prime Minister, permitted the disinterment of Udham Singh's mortal remains. But what they're digging up was largely mud, because quicklime was poured on the bodies of executed prisoners, which dissolves the cadaver almost instantaneously. But nevertheless, his mortal remains were honoured in India when it was returned there. People describe him as Shahid, or martyr. Now, the Congress Party had denounced the slaying of O'Dwyer at the time. However, when his body was returned, the Indian government took a different tune and said he kissed the noose that we might be free. Well, that's enough from this Sikh Gurdwara where Udham Singh used to say his orisons.